talk about how we've developed these and then now partnered with some other studios to help kind of bring this story to life, and talk about some of the techniques and things they used to create these short films. After that, I'm going to go in and talk about kind of this idea of creative prototyping. So Neon was a project developed internally, and you'll kind of see the process, and I'll walk through how it was built up. Now it's going to be kind of a little bit of a cooking show where things have been prepared before, but hopefully it'll at least give you an idea of some of the steps and processes that you can implement into creating this high kind of visual content. And then after that, I'm going to give an overview and actually use Cinemasheen and Timeline in the editor, show you guys what it can do, some of its strengths, and then go back into Neon and create my own little story there. So before we start, has anyone used or heard of Timeline or Cinemasheen? A few people? Okay, that's good. So Cinemasheen is kind of an acqui-hire. So it was an asset store package. We hired the creators, and now it's kind of integrated, or we're starting to integrate some of its part into the engine, but it lives on the asset store, which is kind of a marketplace on Unity where it's freely available for anyone. And the main idea behind Cinemasheen is that it's kind of this procedural smart camera system. So what does that mean? That means that instead of having to write a lot of different code to kind of tell your cameras what to look at, frame different shots, follow certain entities, instead it's kind of all figured out for you, and you're just kind of filling out and adjusting some parameters. So instead of worrying about writing code or kind of solving these problems pragmatically, you can instead just adjust some features, let it help you, and so you're solving kind of creative problems instead of technical problems. And you'll see how what this does is kind of allow you to really have full control of cameras in Unity. And this is things like cutting from one camera to the next, blending two camera shots together, and as well as a lot of kind of procedural things like noise that really bring a camera to life. You know, if you're shooting a short film, or if you're doing something like that, oftentimes you're going to have maybe some bounce or something like that from the actual person holding the camera. And what we've done is built up this tool to allow for a lot of that just to be done procedurally. And again, you're just kind of filling out some parameters there. So the next tool is Timeline. And so for me as a developer at Unity now, I make a lot of small sample projects and applications. And you know, I'm not just saying this because I work at Unity, but this is really a game changer. And what it does is it actually changes the kind of the fundamental workflow and tooling and kind of systems inside the editor. And one of the big things that allows us to do this is this kind of edit time editing. And I'll go in, and when I kind of showcase and use this, you'll be able to really understand what I'm talking about. But basically, the main idea behind Timeline is that you can sequence together anything. So this is turning objects on and off. This is animating characters, animating objects, you know, turning particle effects on, switching between cameras. And the good thing is that, you know, you could always do that before with code, you know, adjusting kind of the timing on things. But with Timeline, you have this visual editor. So you can, you know, go down to a frame level or a second level, or even lower than a second, to really get the exact timing that you need. You know, if in Unity or in any sort of either cinematic or game production, oftentimes you want, you know, I want A to happen, I want B to happen 2 seconds later, and then I want C to happen half a second later. And so you set all that stuff up in code, maybe you have like floating points, and then you get to the point in the game, it all happens, and oh, C happened too late. I need to make that a little bit quicker. And with Timeline, you can easily kind of adjust these, but also you don't have to go to that point in time. This is this kind of edit time editing that I'm talking about, where you can scrub through the timeline bar in Unity, go to the point you need, line everything up exactly how you want it, and then kind of run the game and get the desired results that you want. And so you'll be able to see at the end, when I start to demo these tools, how Cinemasheen and Timeline work really well together. So these are both developed actually here out of our Montreal office, and you'll see kind of the strengths that they offer to each other. So how many people have seen any of the Adam short films? Majority of people, that's good. So if you're not familiar, the story behind Adam is that the very first one was created out of our demo team in Stockholm. So Sylvia and Vess are some of the creative directors and producers and writers that kind of envisioned Adam and brought him to life. And so this is a shot from the very first short film that we released. And again, it was all kind of developed internally. And when we were working on Atom, the first one, it was actually a special version of the editor that had a very, very early version of timeline. And so this is allowed them to sequence things together, understand the tool, provide feedback to the team developing the tool, and really flush out its features and things like that. Now, for Atom 2 and 3, which were released more recently in these past couple months, we actually partnered with Oats Studios. And so that's run by a kind of producer and director, Neil Blomkamp. And what he did is he kind of extended the Atom universe, told some of the stories his way, and used a variety of different techniques, including timeline, Cinemasheen, some post-processing stack to really get the visual fidelity that he needed. And what you'll see here is I'm going to show a short clip from the second Atom film, and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about, and I'll walk through this kind of real-time production. So if you haven't seen this, I am going to kind of skip around a little bit, so there might be a bit of spoilers, but hopefully you're not too upset at that. So when I talk about this kind of real-time cinematic production, what does that really mean? And a big part of it is that all this that you're seeing right now is rendered in real time. And so that means that the lighting, the animation, the setup, all of that is happening in real time. I'm not, compositing my shots and sending it off to a render farm. I'm not, waiting for the full render to come back. And that means that at any time I can kind of tweak things. I could change an animation. I could view things from a different angle. And to just kind of illustrate that a little bit, we can get a shot here. So at any time I can just pause this entire application. I can, zoom out, view things from a different angle. I can see what else is happening in the shot. I could go through, and again, this is all on timeline. I can just scrub through everything. I can start playing it right there. And then, oh, maybe I actually wanted to, frame this shot a little bit closer or kind of behind his back a little bit. I can start to make and visualize these changes. And this is really the power behind what's possible here. So if you're working in a production environment and your art director comes up to you and says, hey, I like what you're doing there, but I want that static to be green instead of blue. Well, in a normal environment, you would have to, take that, change the coloring on it, re-render it. Depending on your setup, that could be hours on your own machine, that could be days to a render farm and back. And what this does is, this is all just in Unity. These are all parameters, these are all things being rendered at real time. So you can start to play around and understand and make these iterations much quicker than you could before. So instead of waiting for the render to happen, having that back and forth process, you're instead spending a lot more time in the engine, iterating on your creations and making them even better. And so some of the techniques that were happened in this one specifically, so we're using the post-processing stack to get this really high visual fidelity, and I'll talk about that when I go through the neon demo here. But we're also doing, if you noticed, the ground right here. So this is actually using photogrammetry. And so this is something that is kind of a technique that's becoming more popular, where you're taking actual real photographs of things in the world. For example, this is kind of a desert in LA, I believe. And you're then using some digital processes to recreate that. And so at Unity, we actually developed a de-lighting tool for photogrammetry models. And what that does is, when you photograph something, there's always going to be some light from the environment on it. And with our tool, you can extract the lighting data to have it be completely unlit. And then this is where you go and use the real-time lighting and the real-time systems that Unity provides. So this kind of photogrammetry was used heavily in this one and the third Atom film, if you've seen that one. And it's using our tool to kind of extract the lighting data, so then we can use the real-time lighting from Unity to kind of light this environment how we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead here. And again, you know, this even blows my mind a little bit when I start to kind of spin this around. It's really cool to see how the environment's put together, how the lighting works. And this is where you're kind of like, oh, you know, maybe I want this entire shot to be shot from this angle. Or you can really start to iterate. You can start to understand the world and pick and choose exactly what you want. And so there's one other thing I kind of want to mention about this. And again, I've skipped ahead a bit and the volume's a bit low. But the last technique that was heavily used here was something called a limbic. So if you're familiar with animation, most of the time for characters and things like that, using like a skeletal rig, you bind the mesh to that, and then you're transforming that data. So there's another type of animation called a limbic, and that's commonly used in things like fluid simulation. And for this piece specifically, they were using it for the mirror's eyes. So the mirror is a character that will get introduced right here. And when we turn and see her eyes, you can see that there's some really interesting kind of geometry and animation going on there. And we'll get a different shot here in a moment. Right there. And so, again, I can just pause this and zoom in a little more, zoom completely out. And so what's happening here is that her eyes are actually this Alembic animation. And at Unity, we developed an import setting to take this Alembic animation, bring it into Unity, and then because it's in Unity, you can just use all these real-time effects, you know, lighting. This one also has some fairly complex cloth simulation that's happening on her outfit here. And yeah, so I just want to, you know, this is, and again, this is kind of the real proof point. You can see the visual fidelity here. This was all made in a real-time production environment. And so the, you know, this Atom 2 and Atom 3 were made in about 5 months. And so you can see that, you know, something of this quality, if you're sending it off to a render farm, if you want to try to do those iterations, if you want to update anything, sometimes it can just not be cost effective, and you have to kind of, you know, make some consolations there. But in this real-time environment, everything happens so quickly and iterates that you have that power to make those changes. And I just want to make a small note as well about Atom. So what we're doing is, if you are interested in what I just showed and some more of my talk, we're releasing a lot of kind of behind-the-scenes videos, talking to Oat Studios, you know, exposing their workflow, making blog posts and things like that. So definitely check out the Unity site as well as our YouTube for a little bit more information on some of the stuff we've been working on, and they have as well. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and get into Neon. So how many people have seen or heard of Neon before? We showed a couple of our Unites. A couple people, okay. So what this is this was actually created by Vess. And Vess is one of our demo team. He worked on the very first Atom. And what he did is he challenged himself, and he said, in a weekend, I want to create a scene that has super high visual fidelity, and I don't want to create or model any assets. So what he did is he grabbed all of these assets from the asset store. So the asset store is a marketplace. It has things like particle effects, 3D models, animations, and everything in between, as well as kind of code snippets. And so he went on the asset store, grabbed a collection of assets, put them together in this kind of creative prototyping process. And so the idea here is, again, that he's not going out there, he's not modeling little things, he's not kind of doing all these details. He just has this idea of what he wants and kind of the mood and tone of what he wants at the end, and then he's building that up within Unity. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of walk through that process a bit for you here. So here's the scene that he started. And again, you know, I'm not trying to fool anyone here. This has kind of obviously been pre-prepared. I'm not fully building this up from scratch, but it hopefully will give you a little bit of an insight into the tooling, into the process here that you can start to work with it yourself. So what he did here is, this is just a normal Unity scene. You can make it a little bit bigger here. And he started with just boxing things out. So, you know, you're literally kind of white boxing the world. If I click on a cube here, you can see we have cube, you know, 0 through 24. Pretty common to just be duplicating, getting this kind of initial block out set. And what we have here is we have this little kind of alleyway scene here. So you can see the floor is a bit shiny. There's kind of some water, some puddles on it there. We have a couple assets, but nothing too complicated. So now I'm just going to go and position myself where the camera is at. So we could do align with view. Whoop. Let's get the main camera. Line view to selected. There we go. So this is what we have going on right here. And you can see that right now there's actually no lighting and shading information in the scene. And that's just this little checkbox that I've done up here. So here's his initial kind of pass on the lighting information. You know, he's done the block out. He's added a couple different lights. And you can start to see where it's going. But as I build this up, you'll start to see how much of an impact some of these additional layers and things have on it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn on screen space reflections. So this is part of our new post-processing stack. You can go get the version 1 of the post-processing stack, but we're actually using version 2, which is available on our GitHub. It'll soon be rolled over onto the asset store version as well, but it's basically much more performant on different platforms, and then we're building it up focusing on things like AR and VR, like mobile and stuff like that. So this is using version 2, and what it allows you to do is actually set post-processing at different kind of volumes or different spaces within your scene. Now, again, for this one, because we're kind of viewing it just from this angle, I'm using a global volume, but I just want to kind of explain how the post-processing stack works. So you can see over here on the main camera, we have this post-processing layer, and then what we're going to do is over here on this post-processing volume object, this is where we can start to either add the effects or just enable them, since I've already configured some of them here. So the first one with screen space reflections, you can see how when I kind of turn this on and off, it gives it that nice kind of reflection based on what I'm looking at here in the screen. And as I add more effects, you'll see this kind of more enhanced. And this is how, you know, this is what you want to do for things like wet surfaces, puddles, maybe smooth like marble tiles or something like that. And so after we do that, we can go and start to add kind of some of these additional objects to the scene. So this is things like atmospheric scattering. And again, these are all available on the asset store. You know, nothing was specially created for this. Some of these are developed from us at Unity, and some of these are external people who just kind of release their own thing. So the other thing that we worked on before the Atom film was this idea of kind of volumetric lighting and volumetric fog. And so that's what I've just enabled there. I can kind of turn it on and off, but you can see how this really starts to come together and give you the depth within the scene. And so the next thing I'm going to turn on is these emissive lights. And emission in Unity is basically kind of a setting on the material. You can ramp that up, give it a color, and you can see how this kind of starts to play in to some of the reflections down here and things like that, and just give the scene a bit more lighting and life. So now if I go back to my post-processing stack, I can add things like bloom, and you can see it kind of being affected there. And again, all these properties in the stack here have some kind of parameters. If I really wanted to blow this up, I could do something like that. And you can see how you can kind of tweak and adjust these to your specific look and feel that you're going for. So the next thing I'm going to do is start turning on a little more objects. So on here we can do the signs. So this is kind of where the scene gets its name from. We're using neon signs. Again, this is just an asset store package. And then here, now this is going to be a pretty big one here, but this is basically the rest of the props. And the big thing to notice is when I turn this on, now, you know, obviously that's a lot of stuff there, but when I turn this on, the reason that it really comes to life is because the lighting that's already been set up. Because, you know, there's this emissive kind of red rectangle over here. We have different lighting and stuff like that over here, and that's what you're seeing on this kind of upper corner in here, on these different elements, is these props kind of being lit by what's in the scene. It has the volumetric fog, it has the volumetric lighting. I can just kind of toggle this one more time. All right, so now if I go back to the post-processing stack, this is where we're going to start to get and be able to visualize a lot of these additional effects because we have a lot more going on in the scene. So we could do something like, let me just zoom back a little bit, chromatic aberration. This is kind of affecting the edge. You can see it a little bit there, but it's basically creating a little bit of a rainbow effect on the edge. And a lot of these effects are actually built to kind of emulate what a real camera does. You know, things like chromatic aberration. We have vignette, which people kind of associate maybe with Instagram nowadays. But you know, this is from like the edges of a camera lens or something like that, and you can, you know, take it up a little too much, but a lot of these effects you want to kind of go fairly subtle with. So the next one's just some grain, some motion blur, and you'll see the motion blur when I start to add some characters to the scene. We have depth of field and rain. And this one's a big one as well, is ambient occlusion. So this is kind of those soft shadows that you want in a lot of parts of your scene. So as you can see when I turn this on and off, again, it's subtle, but it really adds to kind of the visual fidelity, adds to this quality that you're really looking for. So we can do auto exposure. And the last one that's really big is this color grading. So you can see when I turn this on and off, it really kind of changes the look and feel of the scene. And you know, if you guys are familiar, color grading is like an art and a skill in itself. People make an entire career off color grading, you know, matching film shots to other film shots, getting the color correcting, you know, doing it in post-production. And what we've done is we've tried to expose, you know, this level of tooling that professionals can use to kind of get the look and feel and color grade their scene as they wish. And so you can see I can kind of freestyle here, and we're kind of on the shadows. Here's the gamma, stuff like that. I could change the temperature. Maybe I want this to be a little bit cooler, so I'm using the blue, or a little bit warmer up in the kind of reds and oranges there. And again, there's a lot of different parameters here. Obviously, this was, you know, done before I got here, and by an artist with a fairly good eye to really kind of hone in on the look and feel of this. So I'm not going to mess with it too much. The other thing I like to do, which I'm going to kind of undo here, is you can kind of do this hue shift. Which kind of produces some interesting results there as well. But again, you know, this is the post-processing stack. And if I, you know, disable this, you can see kind of where we're starting from. These are the colors, things like that. And then this is what really brings it up. You can see those reflections are especially prominent once we've added a lot of those objects and stuff like that. And the last thing I'm going to do before I turn this on is I'm just going to turn this little rain effect on. And again, this is from the asset store. And then I'm going to turn all the characters on and just kind of show you guys what this scene looks like in its full form here. So we can go people on, and I will maximize it on play. Looks like we're good there. Go ahead and hit play. So there's a little bit of sound. It's not that important, but it adds a bit to it there. And you can see, so, you know, we have some volumetric fog as well as particle effects going on. And so you can see if I fly over here, you can see that kind of being lit right there. There's a little, you know, characters talking over there. You can start to see this. You can also start to see the motion blur when I move it around here. And, you know, I mentioned that he did all of this just from asset store packages. You know, he just kind of put things together. But I mean, you know, personally, I was really blown away. And when we first saw this internally, everyone was just like, "Give me the project! Like, I want to work with it. You know, I want to start playing around. I want to see how you did it. I want to see what's going on." And a couple of the cool things that that we noticed and that Bess kind of pointed out to us is that, you know, again, he didn't create anything. You know, you see this like sewer system going on over here. Well, if I go ahead and pause the game here and go back into the scene view, you can see that that sewer system is actually just the top of this sci-fi building pack. So this was just a sci-fi building pack on the asset store. He just kind of flipped it on its side, scaled it down a little bit, and now you have some interesting sewers kind of in your scene there. Another thing he did here was, you know, he was like, okay, you know, I want this dystopian future. We definitely need some kind of cables coming down from the ceiling, and if you search cables on the asset store, it doesn't really come up with a lot of things. And so he was like thinking like, oh man, this is the one thing I'm gonna have to model, or, you know, something like that, break my rule. But then he found a spaceship. And so if I go to line view to selected, this is actually a spaceship model with cables underneath it, and you can kind of see the model over here with cables underneath it. And so again, he's just kind of creatively using these assets throughout the scene. He's not spending time, you know, modeling all these different assets, getting the exact things he needs. Instead, he's just spending time kind of working on the look and feel of the environment that he wants, using the post-processing stack to really take it to the next level and get this visual fidelity. All right, so this is Neon. This is kind of what Vested. This is, shows how easy. And again, this was made in like 2.5, 3 days over a weekend. He just grabbed a bunch of assets from the asset store, had this idea in mind of this kind of dystopian, maybe Blade Runner-esque scene, and then started playing around with the lights, playing around with this volumetric lighting, volumetric fog, stuff like that to take it to the next level. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk a little bit about Timeline and Cinemasheen, but actually using them in the editor, showing the power of them, and then I'm going to hop back into this Neon and create my own little story, just lining up some cameras, doing some shots and things like that. So I'm going to hop back in here. All right, so what we have here is just one of the guys from the Neon scene. We're just on a little platform here, walking around. And what I'm going to start doing is, first thing is open the timeline window. So this is just window, timeline editor, and for now, I'll just dock it down here and kind of lock it to keep it there. And then what I'm going to do in my scene is just create an empty timeline object. So timeline, and this will just store my object. The naming or anything isn't really important. But so now what I'm going to do is just create a timeline. Call this intro timeline. And from here, this is kind of, if you're familiar with things like After Effects or other sort of timeline tools like this that have this, we, specifically paid attention to those tooling. And you'll see some things like snapping and zooming and stuff like that to help kind of the ease of use here. So the first thing I want to do is make this character animate. Now, the way he's set up is he has kind of an empty object at the top here, and then underneath him, this is his rig, which actually binds to his skeleton and handles all his animations. So what I can do with my timeline here, let me just lock it down there, is I can just drag this rig down here, and then it's going to ask me what type of timeline clip do I want. For this one, I want an animation track because I want him to animate. And now there's a reference to him in the timeline. So I can kind of zoom in there. You can see that character rig. And now what I want to do is I want to add an animation clip. So this is going to give me a little window here, and I'm going to do walk forward. And so now you'll start to see this kind of in-edit editing that I'm talking about, where I'm not going to hit play mode. I can just scrub through this timeline and see him animating. Again, the traditional workflow in Unity is that you're always hitting the play button, everything's happening, and then most of the time, the changes for a lot of the systems we have aren't preserved when you're in play mode or when you're simulating the application. So in Timeline, though, I can just scrub through and see him walking. Now, his animation does have root motion. That's why he's moving forward with his walk here. But you'll see that after the end, it just stops. If I want him to keep walking, I can just drag this out, just like this. And now I can hit play, and he just keeps walking for the entire timeline there. So again, this animation is looping, obviously, and he just kind of walks through there. And again, I'm just scrubbing here. This is all kind of in edit mode. I can make changes and start to line things up here. So the next thing I'm going to do is start setting up just a couple different shots and show you guys how Cinemasheen works and how some of the blending in Timeline is possible. So for Cinemasheen, you need to add a Cinemasheen brain to the main camera. And one thing I want to emphasize here with Cinemasheen is that when I'm creating cameras, I'm going to be creating kind of virtual cameras. Those aren't actually cameras that are rendering anything. They're kind of just an idea of a camera with a certain set of parameters. And then this Cinemasheen brain blends or kind of takes the main camera that's actually rendering things and kind of sets it to that virtual camera here. So I'm going to be placing, maybe 3 virtual cameras, but really it's just the idea of a camera, and the main camera using this brain is going to kind of position itself on there. So I've gone ahead and done that, put the brain on the main camera. I'm just going to drag it down here, and I'm going to create a Cinemasheen track. And you'll see how easily Cinemasheen and Timeline work together. And that's very purposeful. They're both being developed here in Montreal, and they were kind of built with this foresight into how people were going to use them. So I've added the camera there. Now I'm just going to add a Cinemasheen shot clip. And from here, I can just kind of, again, drag this depending on how long I want it to happen. But the big one is I'm just going to go ahead and create a virtual camera over here. And again, this virtual camera is going to have a variety of different settings, things like look at, follow, as well as different settings for how it's going to be aiming and the body's going to work. So I've created my virtual camera. It's this object over here. And if I pull my game window, I'll see what the camera is actually rendering. So right now it's just looking at his feet. So maybe we will pull it up over here. And I'm just going to use Control-Shift-F to basically align this camera to where my scene view is. Now we have that. And now what I'm going to do is make the camera actually kind of follow or look at this character. So to do that, you can see we have up here, we have this look at parameter, and I can just drag any object in there. Now, if I drag the main character in right now, it's going to be looking at his feet. And that's because the way that this object is set up in Unity is you can see the transform is at his feet here. So what I'm going to do instead is grab something like his neck or an object on his rig here that's a little bit more appropriate to be following for his upper torso. So we can grab his neck. So I'm just going to do this right there. And now we're looking at the kind of neck here. And again, what I can do is I can just scrub through here, and you can see now that this camera is following him exactly. Now, you might be wondering, what is this? What are these like red boundaries and this blue one, this little yellow dot? So the yellow dot is what's actually, what the camera is trying to follow. So now there's a little bit of dampening to allow it to go outside of there, but the yellow dot will never go outside of the red bounds. So for now, if I just go ahead and play this, you'll see it's kind of following it right there. If I want the camera to be a little more static, I can actually increase this here. And then now when I play it, you see that it doesn't move until the yellow dot gets to the edge there. So this is kind of the compositor of like what you want in the shot, how you're focusing it, how you're centering it, and things like that. So you can see it's not moving till it gets out there. If I want to kind of adjust it to be like this, again, this is all at edit time. I'm not hitting the play button. All these changes are getting preserved. Maybe I want him in the left side of the shot or something like that. I can just move this around at edit time. All these changes are preserved, and everything kind of stays where it should be here. So I'll go ahead and center this up a little bit here. And the next thing I'm going to do is he's going right there. Maybe right around here, I kind of want to cut to another camera. So I'm just going to shorten this clip here. And the one thing I didn't mention about timeline is this is all non-destructive workflow. You're just referencing animations. You're just kind of adding and timing things up. Nothing is changing the actual asset file here. So we can go and add another shot clip here. And again, I can just create another virtual camera. For this one, maybe we'll do something like a follow. So I probably want to position it kind of behind him like this. Control-Shift-F, do that. And then I'm going to do the same sort of thing here with the look at and follow. We'll do his neck here again. But now we're going to do a follow as well. And so you can see now with this clip, it's moving back and forth a little bit because that's how his bone is. Now I can kind of slow the dampening there so it's a little bit closer to him. And so what's happening here is we have this clip, then it cuts to this clip. Now, let's say I don't really want this hard cut right there. If I want to start to blend these cameras together, what I can do in timeline is you literally just kind of jam these together. And so this is how the blend happens. And now when I'm playing, you can see it blends into it just like that. And so if I just go ahead and play it, and again, I haven't actually hit play this entire time. I'm all editing here in timeline, just scrubbing through and things like that. And you can see it blending there. If we want to see it a little better in the scene, here's the main camera frustum. You can see it's over there, following him here, and now it's going and blending into this follow right there. And you can see how, with Cinemasheen here, and with all this kind of procedural logic, you tell the camera what you want it to do, and then Cinemasheen kind of handles the rest for you. And so the final one, I'll just make, one more camera over here. Again, just kind of adding a shot clip. And this is what I'm going to be doing in the neon scene here coming up, is just trying to create a story, follow some things. And the one thing I'll be doing in neon scene that I'm not doing here is talking about animation in timeline. So, I've said that timeline's very flexible in what you can do with it. I'll show you how you can start animating values similarly to how you would normally in Unity. So I'm going to create a final camera here. Maybe we'll have it, something like this, and we can just do a hard cut. So something like that. And again, I can set kind of the follow to the neck here, or the look at rather. And maybe I want something like this, maybe. There we go. And again, you can see from here, just cuts to there, same sort of thing. And I can actually play the sequence now to show you guys. And again, so that like red and blue thing, those are all just kind of in edit mode there. So we're going here, we're following him, and then we just cut to this nice last shot. Now it ends there because that's where the timeline ends, but you could kind of handle that a little more gracefully. And then, you know, I will say, like, there is a lot that Timeline's doing, or sorry, that Cinemasheen can and is doing. I'm just showing you guys a couple of the basic features. It has things like dolly tracks. It has procedural noise to, you know, really bring that camera to life and things like that. And you can see here there are a variety of different settings over here to really, you know, fine tune and really choose the shot you want and allow Cinemasheen to bring it to life there. All right, so I'm gonna hop back into a neon scene. All right, so again, similar type of neon scene. Let me go into my hierarchy. So it has some timeline going on here. You can see, as I scrub through here, you can see all the characters and everything that's kind of moving in here is animated in timeline. So you can kind of see that a little bit on the left. It's a bit small. But what I'm gonna do is load these away, and then I'm gonna do a similar thing where I create some Cinemasheen, and then I'll start to animate and find my own little story within this scene. So from here, we can go and add a Cinemasheen brain. Similar workflow here. I'm just going to drag the Cinemasheen brain onto the timeline and create a timeline track. And then from here, I'm just going to start creating shot clips with virtual cameras. So the first one just kind of blacked out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in over here, find kind of the shot that I want, something like that, and go ahead and position that there. Now, I'm not going to look at anything for this first shot. Instead, I'm just going to kind of animate this camera. But because I've made it this Cinemasheen shot clip, I can control exactly how long it is and exactly how much it happens. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my camera, and I'm going to bring my camera down to the timeline. And from here, I'm going to make an animation track. And the way that animating works in timeline is that you can hit this little red button here to start recording any values that you change or start adding keys. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this red button, go to my camera, and then key the position and the rotation here. And then I'm just going to kind of hop forward in time here, and I'm going to just move my camera around. So maybe I want it to go a little further down, maybe a little forward, and kind of start to look maybe this way. And now I can just stop recording. And as I scrub through my timeline, that animation is preserved. So I set the keys for the position and rotation at the start. Now I'm kind of animating it to the end over there. And so the next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and create another shot clip. And for this one, I want to highlight these guys over here in the corner, right here. And so again, need to create a virtual camera. Set it to there, and I am going to look at one of these guys here, so let me just find which one he is. Right there. So this is character Read and Smoke. So we can go and find a better position on his rig to actually look at. Right there. So V2, have it look at his neck there. And now, again, I'm going here. I'm going to do a hard cut to this one. But for this animation, I want to affect a property on the camera. So again, I'll just go and drag this onto the timeline, create an animation track. And this is, I can go exactly to where it cuts to, right here at the beginning, start recording on the camera. And then the way the recording works is that if you start adjusting any of the properties, they automatically get keyed. So for this one, I'm going to be adjusting the field of view. So you can see it's adjusted there. I'll go to maybe right here, and I kind of want this field of view to zoom out. So again, can just stop recording. I can kind of clamp this clip to where I want, something right there. And now we have this going on here. So we have a short little animation of the camera going here. We have it looking at this guy and kind of adjusting its field of view, kind of pulling out there. And the last one we're going to do is just kind of a follow cam, blending to another camera and following it, similar to I did in the other example. And then finally, I'm going to show you guys a little bit of timeline inception, which I think is another really powerful part of timeline that allows you to basically put timelines within timelines. So I'm going to go here, create another shot clip, create another camera, and I'm going to line this camera up to what I'm looking at. And the cool thing here too as well is that, you know, this is all in edit mode. I'm going to wait to kind of follow maybe a guy that's coming right there. And so I can see, okay, this is where he starts. This is when I want to cut. So let me just increase that kind of pullback shot to there. And then now, I can just kind of move this over there. I can increase this one to last much longer until it gets to right there. You know, you can just kind of adjust times, do the snappings and things like that very easily. So now we have it going here. We have it cutting to this. And for this one, I'm going to find this umbrella gentleman here. Let's find a good bone to follow. Whoops, going down the wrong rig here. There's the neck. So camera 3, have it look at the neck here. And I'll kind of expand this one out. And then again, if I want to just blend these, just kind of jam them together there. So now we can see we're going from here, and then we're kind of transitioning over there, and we're starting to follow this guy as he's kind of composed in the bottom of the shot there. Now, if I go ahead and kind of hit play on my scene right now, we'll see what we have so far. So we have that kind of animation happening. It's going over to these guys. It's kind of zooming out and holding there for a moment. And then we're going to transition over to that other guy and kind of follow him right there. Now, let's say I thought that all of this happened too fast. I want to kind of extend this out, you know, make things a little bit longer. I could go and, you know, kind of tweak all these timelines. I could start to, you know, maybe shift hold these and all extend them out at the same time. Or I could create another timeline that basically holds and references this entire timeline in it, and then adjust that one. So just to show you guys quickly how that works is I'm just going to go and create a new object here. And I'm going to unlock this and create a new timeline. We'll just call it extended. And then from here, what I can do is we can create a special type of track called a control track. And what that's going to do is I can go in, add a control track, and then on the control track, I can add a control playable asset, and this is what's going to reference my original timeline. From there, so now when I scrub in this timeline, I'm actually scrubbing through the other timeline. And you can see that it's actually not quite long enough, so I can just kind of extend it. I'd probably want to accurately remember how many frames the other one took up, things like that, to get this just right, but I'm just kind of freestyling it here. Go from here, cut to there, something like that. So let's say I wanted to make this basically either happen twice as fast or twice as slow. What I can do here is I can just go here and adjust the speed multiplier. So I want it to last twice as long. So I just multiply it by 0.5. So now the whole animation and the whole playables within it are going to go basically half the speed. Now, this playable does have a reference to all the characters, so the characters are slowed down a little bit. But you can also see how the animation of the camera, and potentially I want to separate that from the characters. And you can see this kind of going a little bit slower, putting this timeline in a control track in another timeline to really adjust it and have the kind of control that you would want over it. And then this is kind of plays into the non-linear editing that's going on here. All right, so that's pretty much all my talk. Thanks a lot for coming. I think we have a little bit of time for questions, and then I'll be around for a bit the rest of the day. So thanks.